What's up? Welcome back. You're watching the 7th part of our series of building clearbnb, this vacation rental platform where we'll allow guests to book listings that hosts are hosting. In this 7th episode, I thought it would make sense to upgrade from Rails 6 to a version of Rails 7. So we'll go through the whole process end to end of upgrading our app. This app was just started, so we probably won't run into anything too crazy, but I just wanted to go through that process and show you the steps, how you might consider upgrading an app. And yeah, we'll just talk about upgrading Rails. So on the Edge guides for Ruby on Rails, you can see this guide for upgrading Ruby on Rails, and it will generally start with in reverse chronological order. So the most recent Rails versions are sort of near the top, and it'll tell you how to upgrade from the previous minor to the most recent minor. So for instance, back here, you could learn how to upgrade from Rails 6.0 to 6.1. And now at the very top, we have instructions for upgrading from 6.1 to 7. So general advice here it gives you is to make sure that you have tests set up and easily to port that over. We don't have any significant tests written yet, so it'll be whatever. The next thing is Ruby versions. So Rails, each version of Rails is going to have like a minimum version of Ruby that it requires. In this case, Rails 7 requires 2.7.0. So the first thing you want to do, go in the terminal and write ruby-v and see which version of Ruby you're on. So I'm on 2.6.3. That's actually not quite enough to get up to Rails 7. So luckily I'm using rbenv here, and I can see which rbenv versions are available by running rbenv versions. And right now I actually have tons of different versions installed locally. If you don't already have one installed that's greater than 2.7, you can say rbenv install and then that version number. There's also another Ruby version manager or RVM. So the instructions are like, these steps are going to work a little differently if you're using the RVM version manager. But I'm just going to set my local Ruby version to 2.7.2. So I'm going to say rbenv local 2.7.2. That actually will create a file. That's going to create a .ruby-version file that will lock us into 2.7.2. And if we cat this out, we can actually see that all it is a file that has the contents with the Ruby version that we need. Okay, so now we're on 2.7.2. That's 2.7.0 or newer. Now let's talk about the upgrade process. So generally, you're going to have a bunch of tests. You're going to watch them pass. You will move to the latest version and run your tests again. And you'll go through and fix all the deprecations, fix all of the errors, and then you'll move up to the next version. So you kind of like work your way towards the most recent version. Right now we're on 6.1. So we're really only going like, basically, we're technically going a major, but we're on the most recent minor from the previous major. So we should be good to go. All right, so we're going to repeat. Yeah, you would just repeat that process until you get to the latest Rails version or the target Rails version. Okay, so in order to move between versions, the first thing we need to do is change the Rails version number in the Gemfile. Okay, so we're going to do that. We'll open up the Gemfile here, and we're going to change the Rails version here to 7. I think it's 7. Let's actually see. What is the latest Rails version? You can see the versions of Rails here. So all recent versions of Rails. Okay, so we are on Alpha 2 still. So I'm going to just set my Rails version to 7.0.0 Alpha 2. The other thing that you'll notice in the Gemfile is that there is a Ruby version here, 2.6.3. So we actually want to change this also to 2.7.2. Okay. The next step it tells us to do is to change the versions for Rails JavaScript packages in Package.json and run yarn install. So let's open up Package.json and see Rails. So we've got, these are all like pointing up at 6. I think we can change this to 7 maybe. Let's just see. And Rails Webpacker. I think Rails Webpacker is actually going away. So I don't know if this instruction is very helpful, but we'll just see what happens here if we run, let's see, we want to run yarn install. And okay, so we actually do want alpha 2 for action cable, and we want active 2 for active storage, alpha 2 for UJS. And okay, so we got the versions a little bit wrong when we guessed them in here, but yeah, okay, so it looks like it's pinning it to the correct alpha. Okay, the next thing to do is to run this update task. So the update task is just the next step here, 1.4, where we run Rails app : update. All right, let's do this. Rails app : update. You have, oh, we need to bundle update Rails. Did we forget this step somewhere? Oh yeah, okay, so run bundle update. So we didn't run bundle update. So run bundle update. We're just gonna run bundle update. It's gonna update a bunch of the versions, but that's okay. It installed Zeitwerk. That's like a new default dependency. Okay, now we should be able to run Rails app update. Rails app : update. Undefined method reference for active support dependencies module. Okay, so this is an error that I have found is because of Devise, because of the gem Devise. So I believe that's what's going on here. So if you look at Devise, the current version, the most recent release, was released April 29th. The most recent like official release does not support Rails 7, but like the bleeding edge version of Devise that's out has support for Rails 7. So what I have found is we actually need to point Devise, the Devise gem, at a specific commit, a specific GitHub commit. And the way that we do that is using the Gemfile's git method so Gemfile GitHub. So this is how we can point a gem or tell a gem to be installed from GitHub. So here what we want to do is we want to say the gem is coming in from Git, and then we're going to give it a specific ref. Okay, so we're going to say gem, we're going to open up the gem file, we're going to go down to Devise, and we're going to say Git. So we want to pull this from GitHub, and the GitHub we want to pull it from is the main GitHub, and the ref is going to be the specific Git SHA reference. Whoops, I didn't need to do that. Copy. And we're going to paste that in there so that we can use the latest bleeding edge version of Devise. So we're going to bundle install again here. I don't know what's going on with Vim. I was messing around with some stuff with Brew, and this is no longer happy. Error detected while processing this thing, complete used without args. I don't know what the deal is with that, but I'll have to deal with that later. Okay, so now let's try running this update command again. Some gems are not going to play nicely because they're still going to be depending on old stuff. So when you try to run update, it's going to fail. Okay, so now what it's going through, it's going to go through and say that there's a conflict with specific files because the new versions for version 7 are going to try to replace existing files. And if there's a diff, then it's going to ask you if you want to overwrite that. And I'm just going to say yes for all of these. And then what I'm going to do is come back and I'm going to look at the git diff and determine whether I believe those changes are good changes or not. Okay, so I'm just saying yes to all of this stuff. You'll notice that at the bottom also there were 2 migrations that were copied over. So one of them was to add service name to active storage blobs. The other one was to create an active storage variant records. I ran into an issue where I was on 6.1 in another app and I had set up active storage and then I tried to upgrade to Rails 7 and I actually had to delete this migration. And I tweeted about it and all the reasons, but basically like I found that when I was using active storage on 6.1, it already created most of this stuff for me. There was a slight difference in the type, but I was able to basically just delete this migration for active storage, the one that was copied over as part of this migration, and it worked fine. So if you run into a conflict when you're running your migrations later, consider looking at this active storage file, because I think that might be a possible issue. Okay, back to our guides. So now it says run your tests. So at the end of this, you're supposed to just run your tests. So what I'm actually going to do is a git status, and I'm going to say we want to add our new Ruby version. We're going to look at the diff in the Gemfile, and that should just be we change the Ruby version, we set our Rails version to 7 alpha 2, and then we updated Devise to pull from latest. So those all look good. So I'm going to add those. Gemfile and gemfile.lock. Okay, we'll do another git status here. What is the difference on bin Rails? It looks like it is just changing these from single quotes to double quotes. So that's fine. So we'll add bin Rails. What's the difference on rake? It looks like we used to load Spring or some Spring paths, but it's no longer doing that. That's cool. Bin, what is the difference between bin setup? This one looks a little bit more significant. We changed the quotes again up here, no big deal. And then it is again changing a bunch of quotes. And then, yeah, more quotes changes, just trying to make them more consistent, I'm guessing. That's fine, whatever. Okay, so let's look at the diff for application RB. Okay, so there was a bunch of stuff that we were installing manually before, and now we're just requiring Rails all. That's kind of clean. And then also at the bottom, we are removing system tests. Don't generate system test files. I'm guessing this is a new default. So that's also fine. Config application.rb. Okay, so then we want to look at the diff in config boot. Also quotes, the diff in development. Okay, so this one is changing like the pattern for the actual, that check, but it's also removing some stuff that we set up for Action Mailer for being able to test like with letter opener and stuff. So I actually want to add these 3 lines back for Action Mailer config. So let's open up in environment development, go down to mailer, and then paste those back in, and then save that. Okay, and now we'll do a diff on production. And there's a lot of stuff that was actually changed in production. So now we have, we're using the Purger CSS compressor, the asset host. Some of these are, again, just quote changes from single quotes to double quotes. Not a huge deal. And then it is adding report deprecations false. Don't log any deprecations. This is probably a security thing. Like you don't want to log deprecations in production. So whatever, that's fine. So production looks good. Let's look at any diff for, oh, I guess like now our development one should be good. We didn't actually ever change anything about tests, so we'll just assume that comes in good. Assets, this one is changing quotes here, and it's removing the import for node modules. That seems safe. And then in the content security policy, this was removing something else. This, I think, again, is like a default now. And then it now has config initializers, new framework defaults for 7. So let's just finish this out. Okay, this is all just quote changes. Okay. There was like a dependency module thing. That thing that caused the error for Devise was a module that was removed. So anything that's using those modules anymore will need to be updated. I think it had something to do with active support inflector or something. Okay, let's take a look at these migrations. So the first one here is checking to see if there is active storage blobs, then it's trying to do like an update on them and setting the service. The other one is trying to create tables for variant records. There's a bunch of really cool new tools in Rails 7 for working with image variants so that you can automatically say like, show me the 100 by 100 variant. And if it didn't exist, then it will like create variants for you and stuff. And that's all handled by, or it's all stored in database tables that are managed for you by active storage. Which is so nice that Rails is figuring all of that out for you so that you don't have to like mess around with migrations as we did with like Paperclip or Carrier Wave or one of those, you know, the older integrations. Okay, so now I'm going to say Rails DB migrate to run those new migrations that were copied over. And whoop, okay, so it looked like, yeah, okay, so I'm actually getting the same error here. So this active storage variant record already exists. So I keep having this problem where this migration is trying to create a table that already exists. So we can do Rails DB console, and we can take a look at what's in the database. So here we can say select, or maybe I can do just /D to look at the schema for active storage variant records. And this will give us the table. So this shows us the table, and we can see in here that it has an ID, and that ID is big int, and it has a blob ID, and that blob ID is big int. And then we can also look at the migration for this, which is creating the active storage variant records. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that we already have all of this stuff. No, okay. So I'm just going to remove this migration for creating active storage variant records, and then Rails DB migrate, and we're good. Okay, so Rails server, fire up the Rails server. It looks like it started okay. Localhost 3000, and we might also need to run split pane vertically. Okay, so we're still running Webpack dev server, but we no longer, I mean, it's like not really like required anymore for Rails 7. So like the upgrades seem to work well, but a lot of people are moving away from Webpack into something like ESBuild or something like that. So maybe in the future we'll talk about doing that sort of migration also, but for now, it looks like our page is up and running. So we've got, this is all working on Rails 7. So yeah, that's how you upgrade from 6.1 to 7. Not too painful. And yeah, if you wanted to go through like all of the changes in detail, you can look through those here. And so there's some information about this active support dependencies module that was removed. Again, the error that we saw was similar to this. The fix again was to update Devise to use the latest. There was also, in the previous version, it used to use classic mode, and now we have to use Zeitwerk mode. That again is something that I think is default for the version that we were already on, so we didn't actually have to change anything. The autoloader was changed. If you had it set to Zeitwerk, just remove it. Dependencies API has been deleted. Yeah, so I think this is the thing that we keep running into issues for, right? So this was the thing that Devise was using that's no longer supported, and I think a private API was being used or something. Okay, auto loading during initialization, not sure what that does. You can configure once pass so that it just loads it one time when something loads, instead of reloading every single time files are changing. Content type is now returned in the header as it is. Sure. Previously, it did not contain the charset part. Huh. Okay. Today we learned. We're not actually using this anywhere, so it doesn't impact us. Key generator digest is going from SHA-1 to SHA-256. So It gives you this code to like roll the keys and the cookies and stuff, but I don't think we're going to need that since we're not actually live. We're just going to kind of like depend on the new default. The digest class is also going from SHA-1 to 256. Cache serialization, we didn't have to change any of these things. It was just updated for us as part of application RB when we kind of just accepted the new version of application RB. There's some stuff that happens with FFmpeg, and then there's a whole bunch of new image processing with this VIPS image processor. I wasn't able to get this installed locally, so we'll have to play around with this later. And we might just use MiniMagick or some other like image magic thing, but there's a lot of new cool stuff that you can do with variants for images. So yeah, you can crop it to certain spots, you can clamp, you can mess around. So yeah, really cool stuff going on with images. And then that's it. So this is where you can upgrade from 6 to 6.1. So this is like everything above 3, number 3 here is all for 6.1 to 7. So hopefully that was useful. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.